Neil's away, the mice will play. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
All hail our new Atari ST Overlords.
The world's third biggest company nearly went bust before they'd even started, and it was all thanks to the Dreamcast.
And CRTs are the best modern gaming monitors?
All this and more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Welcome to the show, Reese. For anyone who's not aware, Reese is my friend and Neil's friend. Reese has been on before, but with Neil now on paternity leave, and I should tell you, Neil seems to be having a whale of a time. I've seen pictures. He looks absolutely delighted. Reese has agreed to come in and fill the massive shoes that Neil has left and help me make sure you get one of these every week. I've got some guests booked, but this week it's just me and Reese. How's your week been, Reese? You Jake Ball.
How's my weekend been? Yeah. Obviously, we're not recording this on the Monday as you usually would. And I must confess that's entirely my fault because I've spent the last 4 days getting drunk, basically. I've been down in Sussex in the heart of English wine country. So, yeah.
You'd like to do that. I taught you a Scottish word, Jake Ball, which describes you and your wife.
Yes. And we have wholeheartedly embraced it. But I suppose a lot of people don't know that we actually make wine in England. But down in Sussex, there's some quite big wineries, and it's actually
is it nice?
Good, but
is it?
It is. It is. I could go into the whole story behind it, but it's a bit off topic for this show. So yeah.
How's your week been apart from that?
Busy, very busy. Obviously, having not been around in the run up to the weekend, I've had to cram everything into 4 days last week, and I literally got back about an hour ago. So yeah, it's not been a bit rushed off my feet, but we're here now. We're ready to go.
I bought myself on a whim a little handheld thing, an Anbernic RG35XX. I put a custom OS on it. I actually put 2 custom OSs on it. I couldn't get it working right. It wouldn't just do the kind of pause and resume thing, so I ended up getting some advice, realising it wasn't the right device for me, sending it back to Amazon and getting a slightly but not really much more expensive device called an RGB30. And this is a device I didn't know anything about, and it's wonderful for us retro enthusiasts because it has a 1:1 display. It's a handheld with the controls on either side of the screen, like you would get in various different handhelds. The Switch is the latest one, I think. And it's a 4-inch screen, but it's a 1:1 screen, so not 3:4, not 16:9. It's a 720 by 720 pixel screen. That means, yes, you get black bars if you're playing a normal portrait game or a landscape game. You get black bars, but it's the same as having a 3.5-inch screen for both, rather than having to try and turn the machine round and so on. So I'm eagerly anticipating that. And I've also bought myself another little present. This is an expansion card for my Amiga. It's a Terrible Fire TF 1260. The big boy, the big 060 for the Amiga to make it go even faster.
Ooh. I
have no real reason for it other than I want shiny stuff. So I bought myself that.
I mean, sometimes that's reason enough, isn't it? In fact, most of the time that's reason enough.
But let's get on with the stories this week. So with Neil gone and Reese filling his shoes, I now declare this is an Atari ST show. Tear down those Commodore flags and put up Fuji logos everywhere. This is the way it is, and this is the way it will ever be. Atari ST for me, and Atari ST for thee. Not really being serious there. But thanks to a submission this week, and it is in the top 3, so no complaining that we've picked this. Thanks to a submission from Pajako, we're going to talk about the top 10 Atari ST loading screens. I appreciate lots of you listen rather than watch, so I'm bearing that in mind. Don't worry, it'll still work. We're going to do our top 10 title screens with a bit of a twist, and Reese is going to help me. So this is an article from someone else with a list of their top 10 Atari ST title screens. And actually at the bottom of the article is a lot more than the top 10 they said. A good loading screen needs to tell us what the game is about. It needs to not only capture the essence of the game, it needs to entice us, to make us want to play the game. It's one of the first things we see. It's quite often the box art as well. And it's especially important for retro games because it needs to help us fill the imagination gap. So the imagination gap, and I heard this phrase from the fantastic podcast, the Ted Dabney Experience. I don't know if it's their phrase or if they used it there. And it's the first place I heard it. But the imagination gap is the distance from what we actually see to what our brains imagine for us as we're seeing it. And when you add that imagination gap, you have an amazing experience. Really important in retro, but probably the most obvious place to see it is in novels. And of course, from their text adventures, or interactive fiction as they're now called. But we also see it in some films as well. If you think of Alien, for example, where you don't see the alien most of the time, your imagination is filling the gaps. Or conversely, if you want to see the lack of an imagination gap, then look at lots of current films and AAA games. They're so busy, there's so much going on, they tell you everything, there's more than you can take in. There's no room for the imagination gap there. But for games, and especially the 8 and 16 bits that we had back in the day, we needed that imagination gap. And where better to see it than on the screen as our favourite Atari ST games loaded. The article has some great covers and some great games. The only one I disagree with is Hellsfar. It's a D&D game, and it's an okay game. It's not the best in the series that SSI came out with, but the title screen isn't very good if you ask me. I don't like that one. So on to ours. So I'll go first, and here's my top 5 games with great loading screens and why the game is so good. So first of all, it is Lords of Chaos. This is a fantastic game from Julian Gollop, a sort of sequel to his game Chaos, which is a much simpler Spectrum game. He made Laser Squad and then went on to make UFO Enemy Unknown. And I think Lords of Chaos is a bit of a hidden gem from him. And I might even like it more than Laser Squad. The game puts you in as a wizard, and you enter each scenario with just your own abilities and your magic. But that magic allows you to summon creatures who can do your bidding. Some are invisible, some can fly, some can carry objects, some can use weapons. Your goal is to explore the map, unlock chests, defeat your opponents, collect treasure, make potions, cast spells, and it's remarkably well balanced. And importantly, you have loads and loads of different options in what you can do in the game. The loading screen, in fact, as it is on the box, is you. You're kind of a golden-skinned wizard with a green robe, and I wonder if this was inspired by Raistlin from the Kryn novels, who had a golden skin. You're holding a glowing staff and about to cast a spell, and it definitely captures the essence of the game and sets it right up. The next game for me is Populous. It's a smash hit game from Bullfrog. It's the first God game that I know of. You're the god of the blue people, and your job is to move the land and let them build houses and then upgrade to castles, let the population grow, let them expand their numbers. You can try to drown your opponents by moving the ground underneath them. You can cast spells with mana to have natural disasters fall on your enemies. You can turn heroes into knights. It's a fantastic real-time strategy game, although I don't think it was ever called an RTS except by me. It's a fantastic game. It's really smooth and it's really polished, just how games should be. And the title screen is sort of a bird's eye view of as if you were diving down towards the turret of a castle on a rock. Again, it captures how the game feels, and it's as if they've taken the box art and zoomed in on the box art, as if you're starting off at the box art and then flying forward towards that castle. It's really good. Now, I'm on the fence if I should have included the next one, and I wasn't sure, but since I'm wearing the t-shirt, I will include Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master is the game that made me want the ST. I'd seen my friend play it, I'd read about it in Dragon magazine. It was going to be brilliant. And it's one of the best games that I think's ever been made. It took huge strides forward for RPGs. And if you now look at games like Skyrim or Fallout, then this is where their roots lie. You take on a party of adventurers in a dungeon crawl to defeat Lord Chaos at the bottom level. Well, the second bottom level. It's entirely mouse-driven with icons and buttons to press. You can then use the keyboard to move as well if you want to. Now, the title screen starts with a whoosh and the FTL logo comes on, and then the Dungeon Master logo before what might be a little bending with rules. I don't think so, where the title screen comes up with the dungeon entrance, and you have the button to either load this previous save game or enter the dungeon, and the black doors slide back. The black doors have a sort of a bestial face with red eyes in front of you, and when you click the button to start the game, the doors, a stone grinding sound, and the doors open up. It definitely sets the mood for the game. The penultimate game on my list is Carrier Command. Fantastic game. Not very many people seem to talk about it. It's a really innovative simulator and strategy game, a bit of a flight sim as well mixed in together. I've seen it described as a real-time strategy, and it is in real time and it is a strategy, but it's not a real-time strategy by any way you'd recognise that genre. It looks nothing like Command and Conquer and plays nothing like it either. You're in control of a carrier ship, and you sail between islands, deploying and piloting various craft to gain and control the islands, competing with an enemy carrier trying to do the same. It's all presented in 3D. It's all fast and slick. As usual, Moby Games has the Amiga listed as the lead platform, but I think it was an Atari ST game. The loading screen is the same as the box art that you can see here. As if you're a jet plane flying towards a carrier with another craft taking off just in front of you. It's an action-packed loading screen for a game that is just the same. And I don't think anyone will be too surprised with which game series I picked for my last game. It is, of course, it has to be Ultima. And I could have chosen Ultima 3, 4, or 5 because they have the same idea with a loading screen. Ultima 5, though, I think is the pinnacle of my Ultima fun on the Atari ST. Sadly, Ultima 6 was disc swapping hell. So the loading screen for Ultima 5 is a half-text interface with the options to go, but on the top half in Ultima 3 and 4 and 5, you see a kind of a little shortened version of the game where you see the characters moving about there, and it really sets you up to play the game, sort of like a cutscene. This kind of animated intro will become, I think, more common. I'm thinking the Eye of the Beholder would have that at the start of it. I really remember that one, but Ultima is the first one I think I can remember like that.
I was just going to say, you talk about Ultima quite a lot on This Week in Retro, and I'm going to have a bit of a Chris moment here because I've never played an Ultima game. In fact, I kind of barely know what they're actually about. So this is your opportunity to sell Ultima to me, and I have to admit, it does sound great. So
Ultima started off as a really simple game based on what was happening on mainframes at the time. As it's moved on, it's become more advanced. Ultima 5 was a half the screen was text with a character map-based graphics overview of what was going on. It is one of the best RPG series ever made, but it finished relatively early on. I mean, by 1992 or 1993, it was kind of reaching its peak. If you were going to play any Ultimas, I would suggest Ultima Underworld maybe, or Ultima 5. I actually did a spur-of-the-moment 26.5-minute recording of...
I haven't watched that yet. I must confess, I haven't watched that.
When you say yet, you mean you haven't watched it, and you're likely not to. I mean, why would
it's
you
on
watch
the list. It's definitely on the list. It's quite far down, but it's on the list.
If you ever get to it, I'll be surprised. It was more about me just getting it out of me. But yeah, Ultima is... I'd like to say everyone should play Ultima, but I played Ultima and that's why I love it. I don't know how accessible it is to someone who hasn't now. That's why Ultima Underworld, which came out at the same time as Doom, with possibly a better engine than Doom for 3, but certainly nothing as fast, might interest you. So there you go. That's my 5. Tell us your 5, Reese.
My 5, right. So my five picks are actually completely different to yours, which is good because we'll have a bit of variety. Mine are a bit more mainstream, a bit more normie, I think. But there we go. That's just my experience with the ST. So the first one, obviously the brief was kind of to pick games that have memorable and kind of iconic and sort of standout loading screens, but also games that are good games in their own right as well. So the first one that I went for was R-Type. And I think this is a really excellent arcade conversion on the ST. I used to play this to death as a kid. Really, really loved this game. I didn't actually have a boxed copy like this. It was actually on one of the Pompeii Pirates menu discs that my dad used to come home with occasionally. But
I remember them. I had loads of Pompeii Pirate discs. They were great.
Yeah, well, obviously, speaking of artwork, I mean, the artwork on those as well, obviously done by Alien, was absolutely kind of outstanding as well.
Yeah, for people who don't know, the Pompeii Pirates ST discs were games on a disc, sometimes more than one disc, certainly more than one game, with this kind of cracktro intro, but they would almost always have a piece of art on the front. Now it might have been some orcs, or it might be some sci-fi scene or something like that. Some kind of artwork there. But quite often as time went on, I think, because we were talking about this, Reese, quite often as time went on, they tried to relate it to the game.
I know on disc 15, which this was on, and I didn't remember that from 30 years ago. I did have to go and look it up. But disc 15, which had R-Type and Hate on it, which was the other game. I don't know if you remember Hate. That was quite a good game, like an isometric shooter type thing.
Something dump. It was an acronym, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And it was a screen grab from Sudden Impact. It was Clint Eastwood saying, "Go ahead, punk, take my games," which was quite a memorable one. So, but yeah, anyway, obviously R-Type itself, the loading screen for this is the first boss, which is also the box artwork. And it was 91 when we got our STE, so I would have been seven or 8. And as you can imagine, to a 7 or 8 year old, late at night in their bedroom, 14-inch TV, lights are off, and then this thing comes up on screen. I mean, this thing used to give me nightmares, and that's why I remember it so well from my childhood. But of course, a really kind of memorable loading screen and really memorable game, and really kind of excellent conversion on the ST as well. So I can highly recommend that if you haven't checked it out. Also, one of my favourite arcade games, although I'm not very good at it. But there you go. So the second one that I went for is completely different. A completely different genre, completely different type of game, and completely different memories of this game as well. And it's Pushover. Now, I must confess, I didn't really play this all that much. I think I had it on the ST. Again, I'm not sure if it was entirely legit, but I mostly played this on the PC. But the intro sequence to this is actually the same on both systems. So you've got that big animated, cartoony opening. You've got Colin who loses his quavers down the anthill, and then the giant has to jump down there and kind of rescue his quavers and stuff, and that's kind of the whole story. Quavers obviously being the big crisp brand at the time that kind of sponsored the game. Never quite understood what the tie-in was.
If you're in America.
Yeah, potato chips, or kind of reformed potato mush in the case of Quavers. But excellent game. But obviously the PC version as well, kind of over and above. I know this is a story about Atari ST, but I can't help but talk about the PC version because it supports the MT32, the Roland MT32 MIDI device. So
famous
you actually play. Sorry, have you got one there?
Well, I have, but I can't reach it from here.
I was going to say mine's over the other side as well. But so it's a fun one just to fire up and listen to because it sounds absolutely excellent. It's all like kind of jazz and double bass and that kind of stuff. So they really did an excellent job on that. But the ST conversion, again, is excellent, really kind of faithful.
Is it STE? Am I right in thinking that might be an STE game?
It doesn't actually say.
Maybe STE enhanced.
It supports the STE. I'm not aware of this. Obviously, there were a few kind of later games that did take advantage of the STE hardware. But I don't think this was one of them. So yeah, interesting question. There's Sleepwalker, which was very similar, and I think that was an STE exclusive.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
And quite similar gameplay, I think, and kind of look and feel. So there's that. Obviously, a really big game on the Amiga, but that was also released on the ST as well, or the STE, I should say. So that's Pushover. The third game that I was going to go for, and these are in no particular order, but the third game I was going to go for is Cannon Fodder, which is a game that I think most of the viewers and listeners should be familiar with. Yes, absolutely fantastic game. And indeed, on the ST, of course, we also got that sampled music intro, contrary to popular belief. But of course, I think the main kind of loading screen that most people remember Cannon Fodder for is obviously that message about it not being officially endorsed by the Royal British Legion, and the whole story behind it, and how obviously
the poppy or not the poppy.
Yeah, Stu Cambridge when he tells the story about it, it's really good how he goes into kind of the mad last minute rush on how they had to change the design.
The news of the world making everybody's life difficult.
Indeed, not the first time, and certainly not the last. But and it's obviously got the animated intro, so it shows you all the team members at Sensible Software, and they're all dressed up in their stupid army uniforms and kind of larking about in a field. So I always really love that one. I just love the sampled music and stuff. So I know it's not a static title screen, and I know that's kind of not the case for Pushover either. But as far as iconic openings and intros go, surely you'll allow me that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So there's that Cannon Fodder, of course, excellent game as well. I don't need to sell the virtues of Cannon Fodder here, but so the next game that I went for, again, completely different. And that is one of my absolute favourite games as a kid, which was Bubble Bobble. And I played this to death, and it's literally just a straight up. That's the one. Just a straight up arcade conversion, and the title screen is literally just the arcade track loop. But I don't know. It was just a very kind of exciting thing for me. It goes into that. Now we begin the journey into the Cave of Monsters, or whatever it is. And
it does. Stuff. I love that game. I've got a confession though. The title screen for that game is stored as just a normal graphics file on the disc, and I went and edited it and stuck my name at the bottom and said "cracked by me," which of course I hadn't done. I was just pretending to be a cracker and stuck my name on it.
Well, I guess it counts, doesn't it? But I mean, a lot of the games that I had, because we were quite late to the party with the ST. Like I say, we didn't get our STE until 91. So a lot of the games I had as a kid were these kind of hit squad budget releases. That we
actually mentioned that a few weeks ago. You collect those little boxes, and I see the appeal in collecting them. Yeah, I've
got I don't know how many of these I've got now. It's well over 20. I don't know how many they made. I think they must have made hundreds of them. But I've probably got over 20, over 30 of these things. But people don't want them. They don't collect them. So you can actually pick them up.
When I got them as kind of job lots, I've given a few to do it for you, I think.
Yeah. Yes, I did get a few from you. Thank you very much. Yes, I should mention
welcome.
that. And so that's Bubble Bobble. Particularly the 2-player mode as well. I used to play that absolutely loads as a kid with my best friend, and he used to come around on a Friday night. So lots of happy memories of that one. Great arcade game as well, of course. And the last one, speaking of arcade games, it's almost like I planned this, is Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. I don't know if you played this, have you?
I have played it briefly on MAME, I think. I've never played it on the ST.
Yeah, so I got this. In fact, I've also brought this to show to you as well. Bit of a show and tell for you. The Atari ST Discovery Extra Pack, which is the pack that we got originally. And it was actually one of the games in that pack. And I've since gone out and got the proper boxed version, because, I mean, the box art's really cool. And the whole game, it has this kind of comic book style to it, all the intermission screens and the title screen and everything else. And it's like an isometric shooter. Not a dungeon crawler type game, but it's got that kind of and robots and flying sections
feel to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, kind of B-movie comic book kind of feel to it. But it's another one where I used to just fire it up as a kid and just kind of watch the intro just as it rolled through, because it was like this whole comic, and again the music was sort of really excellent as well. So they would be my 5 picks, I think.
I think that's 10 really good picks. However, the article is still worth reading. It's in there. I didn't want to go through the article and ruin it for you. Go and have a look, and they've actually got quite a lot more at the bottom. We want to hear, though, what your favourite loading screen is and why, and it's going to be the question of the week this week. Of course, any system is fine. Try and stick to the rules as well as we have. And please no more than 3 in your answers if you can't just stick to 1. We are sponsored, thank you very much, by Pixel Addict Magazine. Pixel Addict Magazine is how often does it come out? How many do you get every week? Is it daily now?
You get 6 a week, something like that?
6 a week, that sounds right. It's a magazine that comes out every 6 weeks. It's written by people like Reese.
Apparently so, yep. No, I have written some articles for them, yep.
This month's articles are around a theme of luggable computers. So luggable is what you would call any kind of portable thing like the Osborne 1 or the Commodore SX64, these things that were portable in a sense, nothing like the super thin Apple books you get now. There's a lot more in there. There's asterisks on the Master System, and there's a NES assembly programming tutorial series. Loads more in Pixel Addict magazine. Your article isn't in this month, so is it?
No, mine was in issue 4. So I wrote one about the Atari Panther, which was a console from the 80s. Yeah. And there might be some more stuff in the future as well. But
no spoilers though. No. So thank you very much for sponsoring us. Where can people go if they want to get Pixel Addict magazine?
They can go, Dave, to pixel.addict.media.
Well done.
There you go. I've been paying attention.
You can order a PDF copy. You can order a physical copy posted to your house. You can order back copies. You can take out a subscription. Go and get yourself reading.
So if you're familiar with the Dreamcast hardware, you might know that it used an NEC PowerVR2 GPU. So what's all this NVIDIA talk? Well, it turns out, and I didn't know this, that NVIDIA was originally working with Sega to develop the Dreamcast's GPU way back in 1996. Now, I think they did some prototype stuff with 3DFX, and they did a Voodoo 2-based setup, and of course eventually they went with the PowerVR 2, but it has recently come out that if it wasn't for Sega and the Dreamcast, that NVIDIA might not even be around today, which, considering they're currently the 3rd biggest company in the world by market cap with a $3 trillion valuation, good one, Sega. So this story comes from Pajako6502 over on the This Week in Retro subreddit, and it's actually linked to Tom's Hardware. Although Tom's Hardware actually cites Wall Street Insights as their source, and I must confess, if you do click through to that, there's actually a bit more detail. So it turns out that the Sega of America's then CEO Shoichiro Irimajiri had taken a shine to NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang, who of course is still NVIDIA's CEO today, has been from the very beginning. And basically, they were working together on these prototypes. NVIDIA came up with some prototype CPUs. Sega were very keen on it being very low power as well, of course, as being kind of groundbreaking for its time graphically. And NVIDIA just couldn't deliver on it. They just didn't have the resources. They were a very new company at the time, had only been around for 3 years. And basically, Huang went to Irimajiri and said, look, unfortunately, apologies, but I can't deliver this thing. And I've also basically set the company on the path to completely going bust in the process. And Sega turned around and said, okay, well, what we'll do, we appreciate all of your efforts. So we'll invest $5 million into NVIDIA and save the company from bankruptcy. So very cool story, this. I love the kind of wheelies and dealies in the tech world and the kind of behind the scenes of these tech companies and how they got to where they are today. And obviously NVIDIA, once they went public, Sega sold those shares for $15 million, so they tripled their investment, and everyone walked away happily ever after. So cool story, this.
I've been mostly NVIDIA over the years. I've had a few ATI, but NVIDIA always seem to be the ones with the best drivers and so on, the best stability moving forward. I don't think it's the same now. I think it doesn't matter who you've got now. But I didn't actually realise they were so young. I assumed that NVIDIA had been around for long and long before they came to suddenly dominate with Riva cards at the end of the 90s. I mean, when this was going on, they were developing and then selling the Riva card in 97, 98, at the end of the 90s. And that seemed to be the card to get after 3DFX. I remember Riva, Tuner and all the rest of it. And they bought out 3DFX, and I always assumed that it was a huge old company buying out a new upstart that went to rocky times. But it turns out there was only a year between NVIDIA, or less than a year between NVIDIA starting and 3DFX starting. So they were kind of neck and neck competitors at some point if they were bought out. And I wonder how different things would be if Sega hadn't saved NVIDIA, or if they had fought it in court and said, we're not going to give you the money for this, and long enough for NVIDIA to collapse. I don't know if NVIDIA would have had something in court. I don't know. But I would have still got my Radeon 9500 Pro. But beyond that, I think I had NVIDIA from that point onwards, and I don't even remember having another ATI card after that. As for the Dreamcast, though, going back to the story, I've never touched a Dreamcast. Is that a Dreamcast behind you on your right-hand side?
That is a Dreamcast and a nice pile of games. That's my Dreamcast from back in the day. So,
I recognised it. So at least I recognise what a Dreamcast
there
looks
you go.
like. I've never touched one. It's a system with, I don't think it's got a huge library, but loads of people love the Dreamcast and talk about the Dreamcast with reverence. So what are the killer games to play on the Dreamcast?
Yeah, I mean, take your pick, really. I mean, there's going to be a few people out there who are really kind of nerdy about the Dreamcast and into the kind of the obscure Japanese games and stuff. Again, I'm a bit normie and a bit mainstream with kind of my favorite games and stuff. I mean, of course, there's Crazy Taxi on there, absolutely iconic. Probably the one sort of killer app that everyone went out and bought Dreamcast for back in the day. Shenmue, which was an absolutely revolutionary sort of open world game at the time, absolutely huge, and probably kind of not all that well known in kind of the mainstream gaming world. I'm probably going to get some comments for saying that, but there you go. But the games I remember playing with my friends back in the day was stuff like Power Stone, which was like a 4-player kind of fighting, brawling kind of game. Interstate 76, which is like a 1970s themed funk vehicle combat game. Well worth checking out if it's not one that you're familiar with.
Carmageddon type thing, or?
Yeah, I guess you could compare it to that. Yeah, it's kind of more kind of open world combat than racing as such, or at least that was how we used to play it anyway. And of course there was Choo Choo Rocket, there was Soul Reaver, Legacy of Kain. Used to absolutely love that game, and of course the Tony Hawk games. They came out on pretty much everything, but yeah, great Dreamcast conversions of those. But like you say, the overall library was kind of small compared to the PlayStation and the Xbox and other stuff at the time, just because the console was so short-lived. But I think the games on it are particularly good.
What about you? Have you always been NVIDIA, or are you ATI mixed in there as well?
Yeah, so the first 3D graphics card that we got was a Voodoo 3. And then I think we kept that in our family PC until it was very, very long in the tooth. And I eventually went to college and I was working part-time and earning a bit of money. And I kind of finally built my own gaming PC. And that had an NVIDIA GeForce FX 5200 in it.
There's a huge gap between the Voodoo 3 and
yes.
the FX 5200. You're talking 5 or 6 years or something like that, just off the top of my head. And back then, that was 15 years now. Yeah,
I mean we're talking from original Half-Life to Half-Life 2. I think it's probably kind of the time span, at least sort of games that I was playing at the time. And the 5200 obviously wasn't kind of that fondly remembered by history because it was kind of the bottom end one. But I was a poor college student, and at least it meant that I could play those games. But apart from that, yeah, I've been NVIDIA ever since. Very recently. Got a nice offer from my good friend Richard Shears, who I know is a regular listener of yours, and I have upgraded to a Radeon RX 7800 XT, which I'm told is quite a beefy graphics card, but to be honest, all I use it for is for playing remasters of 90s boomer shooters, so probably wasted on me. Housekeeping with Dave.
Perfect.
Sorry.
I want to welcome 3 new patrons on. I want to welcome Baldhead, who's obviously taking this in the spirits intended, Richard and Bill. Thank you very much for signing up to be patrons. Very much appreciated. If anyone else wants to join them, they can go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro and join the ranks of the twirlers. It's a quiet week for housekeeping, which is a good thing because we've got lots of other things to discuss with Reese coming on. So we'll go straight on to briefs. And as I'm typing up these notes earlier on, I was ignoring the currently top upvoted story, which I'm not going to mention at all, and it will become clear in a few weeks why I've not done that. Lord Borak has submitted a picture of his CPC, and I have to tell you, Lord Borak, that the Amstrad CPC never died. It's getting into the spirit of the Olympics playing summer games. He asked the question, does anyone else fire up classics when inspired by sporting events?
Binky Bong, great name, lets us know about a Project Turbo Outrun reimagined. And Good Punk replied on that, and it turns out to be the dev and has linked a preview video. So that's available over on itch.io, and there's a link on that YouTube video to go and check that out.
From Dr. Local, a very interesting thing, CD sales are growing. So CDs are now retro. People have been listening to us and have started buying CDs. So go and chuck those vinyl records out.
Squelch411 links us to a Register article on the clamshell G3 Mac. It's 25 years old and still looks like a toilet seat. And just before we go on, I just wanted to point out that I had a friend at school who had one of these back when they were new. So this was the clamshell G3 iBook, and his was a hideous shade of lime green. And yeah, even back in the day, even 25 years ago, we used to mock him mercilessly because his laptop looked like a toilet seat.
Rich, 2600 has a Kotaku article titled Are Physical Games Dead? It's more complicated than you think. And it talks about how people still demand physical copies of games. It's a minority, but still lots of people, enough to be catered for. Haven't read the full article, haven't had a chance, but don't really personally feel that a physical copy counts as a physical copy, even if you get the Keat case, you open it up, take the disc out, and put it into your machine. If all that does is kind of pre-download, and then you have to type in the key and it has to connect to an online server and download the patches, it feels not so much a physical copy.
Yeah, we bought a Switch game for our nephew. I think it was at Christmas, and it turned out that was one of these ones that's literally just a download. The actual game isn't in the box. And I mean, he's, what is he, 5 or 6? And obviously, you know how patient 5 or 6-year-olds are. So not ideal. But anyway, Pajako tells us that players in Super Mario 64 have managed to open an unopenable door using a penguin and a backflip.
There's nothing more alluring than an area you're not supposed to go into in a game. A secret area, wondering if it is possible, if there's something hidden in there. A lot of environmental storytelling happens in kind of first-person RPGs that way, and it's fantastic. There is loads more on the subreddit, including a video with 70 different hard disks spinning up in a compilation, one after the other. Sega buying Stake Logic, a business-to-business gambling platform, so they're going into the shoes of where Atari were a few years ago. The Pi-based Bartop Piecade Max is coming out. It's £500 for quite a large Pi-based arcade bar top machine. So a bar top machine it's like an arcade cabinet that's been cut off just underneath the control panel, so you can put it on the top of a breakfast bar or a desk or something. It's £500, so it's a lot of money, but it does look good. It is a flat screen, though. There's no getting around. It's a flat screen. But there's loads more on the subreddit, and I should tell you the way it works is you go to the subreddit. The URL, Reese, is
reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
Correct. You go to our subreddit, and people will be submitting articles all the time. You can go and click on what's interesting to read. You can see if you like it. You can submit your own articles. You can click the little up and down arrows in other articles to say what you're interested in, what you're not interested in. you can do that whenever you like, and you can add comments to them as well. And then when we prepare the show, we go in and we try and pick the most popular submissions to talk about. We'll pick usually the top 3, and then we'll talk about a few more, and we'll list a few more that caught our eye as well. So have a look at the subreddit if you want to, or just listen to the show. Around the time of the millennium, we seemingly all switched from CRT monitors, these huge, big beasts that took up most of our desks, to flat screens. And I don't remember anyone at the time thinking anything other than this is a huge improvement. They were just better. And the sooner we get rid of those old CRTs, the better. I do remember people talking about ghosting, about people talking about panels with viewing angles and so on, but it never was mentioned, yes, CRTs didn't have this problem. Never was entered in anyone's minds as far as I know. And flat panels were better in lots of ways. They were smaller and lighter, and this means that we didn't need to have a desk that went quite so deep. They were cheaper too, and we got bigger screen sizes because of flat screens, because it was able to make them bigger. And I don't think I looked back. For a long time, I didn't look back once I moved to a flat screen, not until years later. And it might have been because at the time I was playing mostly text-based games, so it suited me. A flat screen's better for text. But years later, I found out that old games look better on proper arcade machine monitors, not on flat panels. And old games look better on CRTs, not flat panels. Now, there's lots of explanations on the internet about why it is. It comes down to various combinations with the brightness or the contrast between how black the blacks are and how bright the brights are, the glow, the colours bleeding into each other and giving a sort of anti-alias kind of diffusion effect on it. You can read explanations saying that video game artists took this into account and showing you pictures where the CRT image for a character looks great and where it doesn't when you look at just a flat panel. And I would take that with just a little pinch of salt, because I think sometimes we're crediting these people with things they didn't necessarily do. I mean, if you look back at 8 and 16-bit games, they were just what they could manage to do. And I'm sure some of the games, when you look at Monkey Island, for example, the dithering in that was certainly deliberate. But if you look at old Sierra games, for example, that was just what it was. I mean, I don't think the CRT enhanced much of that, unless it made it more blurry. But as you go up in resolutions, the differences become a little less stark. And of course, that's difficult too, because when you have a CRT in the right resolution, you can't go up in resolutions like you do on flat screens. My last CRT was a 17-inch, and for a 4:3 monitor, it's not huge. In fact, almost all of the CRTs I had were 14 inches, which is really quite small in comparison to modern screens. But thanks to a submission from Pajako, I've been learning that people are still using CRTs on modern stuff, and they're pushing it to new heights. There's a series of videos, and the latest update is overclocking a CRT up to 700 hertz. So that's way, way faster than they were meant to run. And here's the interesting bit. It's much faster than the current top-of-the-range flat panel gaming monitors. In recent years, particularly I think for Battle Royale, kind of esports type games, there's been a real focus on getting faster refresh rates, as if that helps you do better in the games. I'm not convinced how good 250 hertz is compared to 150 hertz, if there is actually a difference in that point. I don't know. But there's a real focus on that. But it turns out these old CRTs could be forced to do it. It's, of course, really difficult to see what the image quality on a CRT is when you're watching it on a flat screen of a YouTube video. It's like listening to a YouTube video on reviews of speakers. How can you possibly tell which one's better? But it did look pretty good to me. It looked buttery smooth scrolling, high fast resolution CRTs with modern games. They might look good, and I'm tempted to one day connect up a modern PC to my great big old CRT and see how it looks. But I'll come back to that later. Rhys, what did you think of this? And do you love a CRT?
Do I love a CRT? Well, very much so, yes. So I remember when Neil used to do his RMC live stream videos, and he used to ask for submissions, 90-second submissions on various subjects. And I did one on CRTs. In fact, you can go and see it over on my second channel. It's a bit of a plug there. But I think it was... I basically went around the house with a camera and tried to round up all of the CRTs that I had at the time. And I think it was something like 17. And I've only amassed more since then, since I've had this studio, because now I've got somewhere to hide them all away from the wife. So I haven't had a count recently, but it is more than that. But of course, I do very much appreciate the CRT. Of course, it's the way this stuff was designed to be played. And yeah, that's... always kind of been a big fan of them. I mean, that PC that I mentioned earlier with the FX 5200 that I built when I was in college, I think that was the first flat panel. I think our family PC at home, I think we were still on a CRT at the time. So I think that was
it would be the time for it, yeah. It would be the round time for it, yeah.
And I remember just obviously having it set up on the desk and playing Half-Life 2 on there and thinking, this is the future. This is amazing. It doesn't take up the entire desk, but I've got flat panels of that era now, and that would have been a cheaper kind of budget model as well. I've got flat panels from that era now, and you look at them now, and it's like they're not all that good, are they?
I should mention, I don't know how many CRTs I've got. I think you'll have me beat now, but I certainly have more than 17 now. But you'll have a lot more than 17 now. I did get a new one at the weekend. A friend sent me a WhatsApp and said, "This is going to the dump. Do you want it?" 14-inch Sony Trinitron TV. Yes, please. I've got that. So he came round for a beer and I got a free Trinitron.
Very good. Very good. With the RGB SCART input as well, because it's a consumer TV.
RGB and SCART. I don't think it's got Super Video. So I was wondering if I'd get an 800 XL in the back of it, but I think that'll have to be composite. But I think if I mod it, the composite mod that you were telling me about, it should look great. I remember you buying a job lot of flat panels with grand ideas about it. I know fine well how it went. How did that go? Was that a good idea? Did that turn out well?
So that was a video that I did for my channel, yeah. So I bought a, I don't know if you can see it. Oh, it's down here. It's probably just out of shot down here. But in fact, no, there it is. That is one of those. So it's Digipos branded point of sale PCs that were used in a shop. I think it was a big clothes shop. And there was also a job lot of these little LCD panels that had obviously been worked to death. I don't know how old they are, but they're 10, 15 plus years old probably. On all day, every day in a kind of a retail setting. And as you can imagine, they were... I can't remember, was it 10 that I bought? And I think I bought, I think out of those, I managed to put together 2 that kind of worked. One's not too bad. The other one, I think the backlight's failing, so it's really dim. But it was basically a case of just a company disposing of their e-waste by selling it to not very bright people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, rather than paying a proper e-waste disposal company to take it away, they get people on eBay to pay them for it. So yeah. Quite good as far as
I watched that and it gave me a little moment of clarity about the stuff I'm buying, thinking, am I buying e-waste? Am I buying e-waste? And every time I buy something and afterwards I think, what did I buy that for? I think back to Rhys and his LCDs.
I haven't disposed of the remains of those, so I've still got one of those big, really useful boxes up on the shelf there, and it's just completely crammed full of just the remains of all of the non-working screens.
I actually have nearly the same monitor as in this video. Mine is a massive 21-inch Ilyama Vision Master 502. It's not currently in use until I move things around, but it has a wonderful picture. It's fantastic for DOS games of a certain era. I did have it connected up and I was playing, sorry, not DOS games, maybe more Windows games. I was playing DOS games on it and it's a bit too big to sit in front of to play 320 by 200 games, so I've replaced it with an IBM, I think it's either 14 or 15-inch monitor there. But I will put the Ilyama back into service when I've got more room for later games. I don't know about overclocking it. I don't think I'll want to, but it's interesting, certainly enough. And I will try more modern games on the 502. I want to try something like games from maybe Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, that kind of era, Mass Effect 2, just games that will work on kind of Windows 7 kind of thing through it and VGA and see how they look. And I suspect it'll look good. If you do use a CRT for modern gaming, do let us know in the comments. I'd be really interested in that.
Yeah, I might have to steal that idea.
On to question of the week. Now, last week, we asked the question. Let me bring it up for you. We asked the question about rivalries. What are gaming's greatest rivalries? We talked about X-Wing and Wing Commander. What other series went toe-to-toe, and which of them came out on top? Our disable contest mode, it's slam shut. Our top answer is from, I'll tell you afterwards, it is Street Fighter 2 versus Mortal Kombat, and I think this is a worthy top answer. It's the one I remember. In hindsight, I think it's pretty clear that Street Fighter 2 is the superior game due to its more varied characters and gameplay. I do appreciate the shock value of Mortal Kombat and wish there were more games out to shock their players and upset the establishment these days. I just think that Mortal Kombat had more to it. There was more depth to it just because of how visceral it was with all that going on. It grabbed me more, but it's fair to say it came out later than Street Fighter 2 and it was riffing on what Street Fighter 2 did. So you have to give it that. Now, that one came from Tom Palompin, and he said, Dave, if you're going to read this out, don't start singing the Oompa Loompa song again. Once was plenty. So that came from Tom Palompan, thanking you. Once was enough, but you're getting two.
See, I knew that was coming. And yeah. Anyway, so the second answer is from Sparkyar, and basically says, I would say PES/Winning 11 versus FIFA. Of course, PES was Pro Evolution
Soccer, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I think I vaguely remember that. For almost a decade, late 90s to late 2000s, PES/WE was the clear winner for those who wanted more realism in our football games. Football being FUTBOL. And living in Argentina, that makes sense. We also got countless not-so-legal Winning 11 fan mods with proper players/club names because EA always had the biggest leagues licenses, or conversions with local South American leagues and Copa Libertadores. Is that right?
Oh, good. Neither was going to do it.
I'm not a football person.
Libertadores.
No, I'm so sorry. No, yeah. Shout out to my friends Ramiro, Gaston, Christian, and Martin. I bet I could still beat you 25 years later. Swiftly on.
Border Gogo says, whenever I think of gaming rivalries, I always think of the two combinations. Firstly, Doom versus Duke Nukem 3D. Although released 3 years apart, they both had longevity enough that they were many years when either were good LAN party options. Also, the fact Duke trash talks both Doom and Quake in the game. Gotta love the little digs. And secondly, I always picture Quake and Unreal as rivals. That's certainly true, they were. Again, couple of years between the releases, and although Unreal had some technical edge over Quake, I still found them both equally compelling to play. I could never decide on Team Id or Team Epic Mega Games, where you had Unreal Tournament versus Quake 3 Arena. I think that was the kind of the culmination of that. Fantastic answer there.
Bobbers74 writes, Sensible Soccer versus Kickoff. Yeah, that was a really big rivalry back in the day.
I have to include that one, yeah.
I mean, personally, I enjoyed both, but I remember there being strong support on both sides at the time. I guess it was similar with Pro Evo and FIFA later on, but Sensi versus Kickoff is where it started for sure.
Yeah, I think if you played Kickoff long enough and then didn't force yourself to play lots of Sensi, you stuck with Kickoff. But if you didn't play Kickoff first and you played Sensi, you was with Sensi. If you played enough Sensi, you would stick with it. But there's loads more in there. There's loads of answers this week. Call of Duty and Battlefield. Happy Coding says, as Dave well knows, the greatest gaming rivalry is X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Very clever answer, Alan. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter is a game. Unreal Tournament versus Quake 3, yeah. Spy versus Spy, that's a game. One game called Spy versus Spy. Ultima versus Wizardry, that's an old one. Microsoft versus software development houses. How many have Microsoft killed now? Yeah, loads and loads of answers. Razer 1911 versus Skid Row. GTA versus Saints Row. Lots of answers there. Go and have a look if you like. Our question for this week is, I mentioned earlier on, we want to know what your favourite loading screen is. Any system is fine. Try and stick to the rules as we have. A loading screen is what you see before you play the game. I'd like you to put one answer in and why you like it, but if you can't decide, then no more than 3, or I will disqualify your answer and take it out. And I think that is us for this week. If you'd like to see more of Reese, then come back next week. No, if you want to see more of Reese, he has a channel, Control-Alt-Reese, and he also has a second channel, Reese, where he does a podcast every week, Reese Rambles. And you've got a website. What's your website?
Control.reese.com.
Fantastic. What a theme. Thank you very much for coming on as a guest host. Thank you very much, Reese. I'll see you next week, and we'll see all of you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. He's waving.
And I'm waving too. Bye-bye. Bye, Duncan.
Bye.
Bye, Neil. Hello, Neil. I know you're watching.
Hi, Chris.
See Chris soon.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.